Okay, folks, welcome to Basic Anatomy. We're going to be using the PowerPoints that were developed by Dr. Bradshaw, who is head of life sciences for the Winter Haven campus. Anyway, so what we're going to try to do, we're going to do an overview, talk about what anatomy and physiology are. We're going to talk about levels of organization. We're talking atoms forming molecules, forming cells, etc. Stuff like that. Um, we're going to talk about what's necessary to be alive, things we have to do. We're going to talk about homeostasis, maintaining internal body conditions, and we're going to distinguish between positive and negative feedback. It's super important. I want you to know, will definitely be a test question. Negative feedback is a lot more common in our bodies than positive. Now, anatomy is basically what are the parts? Name the parts. Physiology is how do those parts work together to do a thing? So if you're talking about anatomy, you're talking about what something is. If you're talking about physiology, you're talking about how the parts work together. Now, in anatomy and physiology, we usually talk about the difference between gross and microscopic anatomy. Gross anatomy, think of a German accent because gross means big. So a lot of old anatomists back in the day were Germans, and so gross anatomy is, oh, we're looking at the big stuff, a lot big things, easily seen surface features. If you need to break out a microscope, you're doing microscopic anatomy. It's very small stuff. Uh, we have words for specific parts. Logi is the study of, let me back up there. Logi is the study of, cyto is cell. So cytology would be the study of cells. Histology would be the study of tissues. Those are two examples of microscopic anatomy. Now, I said we do levels of organization. You can see that atoms come together to form molecules. Molecules come together to form organelles. Organelles come together to form cells, like this smooth muscle cell. Cells come together to form tissues. Tissues come together to form organs. Organs come together to form organ systems, and organ systems form organisms. So here we have cells. This one was a muscle cell making muscle tissue, and the tissue is used to make organs like this blood vessel. That's part of the cardiovascular system, which carries blood through the body of the organism, like the human in this case. All right, so, and those systems in an organism, they all work together. So this digestive system, it brings in food and it secretes the waste at the end that we can't use. What's doing is taking nutrients out that are going to be used to power the body. But it can't do that unless the circulatory system carries those nutrients all through the body so the rest of the body can use them. The same way, using those nutrients requires oxygen. Like, say, mitochondria breaking down glucose, that requires oxygen. So you're going to need to have the respiratory system deliver oxygen to the blood, which will be carried through the body. And then the same blood is going to carry carbon dioxide waste away and take that back to the lungs so we can breathe it out. Um, Other waste will be here, you saw it a second ago. Other waste will be put into the urinary system. Our urine, one of its jobs is to secrete urea, nitrogenous waste, which breakdown of protein is one of the things that causes that. Now, what do we need to stay alive? The body must do certain things to stay alive. We've got 8 processes, and so the difference between uh, okay, we're about to bounce through these. So these are the things we need to stay alive. We need to have a boundary between the outside and the inside. On us, that's the skin. On a little single cell microbe thing, that'd be its plasma membrane, the membrane around the outside of the cell. Everything that we know of that's alive, it can move in some way. Everything we know of that's alive can respond. And when I say everything, even plants, even fungi can move. Talk to me in a biology class though, because we're just doing human anatomy, basic anatomy. But everything can respond to stimuli. We have to have the ability to digest. That means we have to be able to take in food and break it down to get nutrients out. We have to be able to metabolize, which is a way of saying those chemicals, those nutrients that we gathered, we're gonna have to be able to use that energy. Metabolism is the sum reaction of all the energy related reactions going on in the body. Excretion would be getting rid of waste from metabolism and digestion. That could be taking the undigested feces and removing them from the intestines, pooping them out. Could be peeing out urea that was made from by the cells. Um, Everything we know that's alive, it can reproduce in some way. Little single-celled microbes, they divide in half and make a new cell. For us, we have sexual reproduction to make new offspring. Now, everything we know that's alive can grow. In a single cell, it grows bigger before it does the division we just talked about. In us, you think of a little kid standing next to a door, and the little marks on the door showing the door jam showing us how they're getting taller. Um, so what do we need to survive? We need nutrients, and we're going to talk more about these, but carbs, fats, proteins, minerals, and vitamins. The first three there, carbs, fats, proteins, those are things that we can break down and use the energy. Proteins often used for building blocks, carbohydrates often used in surfaces of cells. I'm talking about as a non-food thing. But minerals and vitamins, we're talking about cofactors and coenzymes, things that make it possible for enzymes to do their jobs. And we might get into details of that. Oxygen is necessary. It says essential for energy release, ATP production. Let me say that another way. If you've done the Krebs and glycolysis thing already, electron transfer thing already, you already know this. But if you don't have oxygen present, you can still make a little bit of ATP from breaking down sugar, but not enough to be useful, not enough to stay alive. You can't live without oxygen because you're not making enough energy. If you want to get all the energy out of the nutrients that you're breaking down, you need oxygen to do it. Anyway, we need to have water. Water is the most abundant thing in the body, 60-80% of body weight, and most chemical reactions happen in water solutions. Now, our normal body temperature, this is a science class, so we use metric. It's going to be 37 degrees centigrade, but the temperature, when it's higher, speeds up reactions. And the reason we have enzymes is so we can get some of the speed without having the higher temperature. And the appropriate pressure. If you don't have a high enough pressure, you're not getting enough oxygen. And this is not a hypothetical. You know, anybody who climbs up Mount Everest, they usually have supplemental oxygen with them. That's so they don't run out of oxygen, because the air pressure is so low that even when they breathe in a lung full of air, it doesn't have enough oxygen in it to keep them healthy and happy. All right. Now, homeostasis is keeping constant body conditions inside. We try to keep the pH of our body, the temperature of our body, the water balance in our body. All these we try to keep at a certain point. And when we do this, we are probably going to, a lot of this will be a negative feedback system. And the classic example, of course, we talk about, oh, I'm cold. So what am I going to do if I'm cold? Well, you might put on more clothes. You might shiver. Okay. Both those are to increase heat. What do you do if you're hot? Well, you probably take the blood and you send it to the body core. I'm sorry, from the body core up to the skin. So you can then whenever the blood goes up to the skin and the capillary beds, you can then radiate heat to the outside. You could even do evaporative cooling by sweating on the skin. That would cool off the skin, which cools off the blood in the capillaries, and then you return nice cool blood back to the body core. But here's the thing: what we're about to talk about is what we need to maintain homeostasis. We have to have receptors, so thermosensors would be the parts of the nervous system that sense temperature in that case. They monitor the environment and they respond to stimuli. The temperature drops or temperature goes up too much. You have to have a control center, and that's going to probably be the central nervous system in that case. It'll determine the point at which the variable is maintained. What are they talking about? Well, if we're talking about temperature, we're talking about 37 degrees, and we want to stay there. That's the variable, the temperature, and we want to maintain it at 37. The control center in the central nervous system receives input from your thermoreceptor saying, hey, we're hotter or colder than we should be. And then it decides what to do. And it asks an effector to do something about it. The effector gets the signal from the control center and does something. It might be it sends a signal to the muscles so they start to shiver, so you build up temperature. Um, so there's an example. Or it might be, if you're going the other direction, it might be that we're going to try to cool the body. So it will send a signal to the capillaries to vasodilate. So there's less resistance and more blood goes to the skin. All right. Now, here is the classic seesaw teeter-totter picture of a negative feedback system. And again, you need to know that negative feedback is much more common than positive feedback. And the reason why they call it negative feedback is what you see in this teeter-totter. What you see is, well, we do something, it goes like this, and oh, no, we have to do the opposite. Negative feedback. Oh, no, we have to do the opposite. So you're actually going to have, say this is the set point that you want to be at, your temperature would actually go a little above and then a little below and then a little above and then a little below, a little above, a little below. It's going to cycle like a sine wave around a certain set point. But when we look right here, we have a stimulus, and in temperature, we use the example already of something that tells you, your thermosensor tells you your temperature. Sorry, this is the cold. Then the receptor tells you the temperature. Input, you send that signal to the central nervous system. And these two words, efferent and afferent, really important. Afferent signals, the A should remind you they arrive at the central nervous system. Efferent signals exit the central nervous system. And they go out to an effector organ. That's usually a gland or a muscle. And but that effector will make a thing happen. And in the case of shivering, it's going to make the shivering happen to generate heat. They'll bring us back to the direction we want to be. Anyway, so efferents send signals out to effectors, and afferent takes signals in from the sensors, and those signals will arrive at the central nervous system. All right. So negative feedback shuts off the original stimulus and gets us back to normal. And it's doing the opposite of the original stimulus. So we were too cold, we try to warm up, or too hot, we try to cool off. And most feedback, this is like the third, fourth time you've heard it, is a negative feedback system. There are positive feedback systems. Milk production, blood clotting, birth of a baby, those are all positive feedback. In those, the original stimulus comes in and it's going to cause something to happen, but that'll cause more stimulus that causes more of a change. Give you an example. Say we're talking about birth. You might have a little bit, like in the hospital, if they want to induce labor, they'll give you a little bit of Pitocin, which is synthetic oxytocin. They'll give you a little bit of Pitocin, and that little bit of Pitocin is going to cause little so little Pitocin, little contractions. Those contractions cause more Pitocin to be released, which will cause more contraction, which will cause more Pitocin, more contraction. Keep going, building on itself. That's why it's a positive feedback. They'll happen up until you push the baby out. All right. So here we're looking at the negative feedback, the one that's more common. Hey, we already talked about this example. It is temperature. We talked about it multiple times, but definitely check it out. Um, So you will need to know about how we do a thing that's the opposite of the condition, and then we go past it, and we have to compensate by going in the other direction. That seesaw, that balance, swinging back and forth, that is a classic thing. Right, negative feedback. Positive feedback, like blood clotting, you have a stimulus, something going to happen. Well, we have a cut in a blood vessel. So it's going to stimulate something to happen, and there'll be chemicals that are released, which will cause more chemicals and more platelets. And this keeps going around and around and around until we finally will stop building when we get to we've made a clot, a platelet plug. Um, but until then, chemicals, platelets, and clotting, chemicals, platelets, and clotting, chemicals, platelets, and clotting. That is the positive feedback system. All right, that covers the homeostasis. It covers the positive and negative feedback system. It gives you levels of organization. That's the end of the first PowerPoint. If you guys have any questions, concerns, issues, drop me an email, uh, hit me up, and let's set up a Zoom meeting. That would work too. So, all right, I'm gonna stop this here.